Good morning, everybody, and a very warm, sunshiny welcome to this morning's live stream. Watching on YouTube. Hello, everyone. I love technology. It's so exciting. I'm just loving how we can just reach so many of you at the moment. And on YouTube this morning rather than Facebook, because good old gremlins have been in the system. But oh, I've got some feedback coming through my speakers. Don't know why that is. Maybe our elves can sort that out. There we go. Wonderful. Thanks, elves. um, Take two. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Kelly Jarvis. I'm the head of advocacy and consultancy here at Sunshine Support. And of course, I'm not Chrissa. I know many of you tune in to see Chrissa, but she is enjoying some very well-deserved downtime. You'll know that she's had a really tough year. So she is, yeah, having a bit of time off, and you have me instead. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Please do let me know in the comments on the YouTube video where you're watching from. And I will say hello because I've got two screens going on and my lovely elves are letting me know all the nice things you're saying on YouTube. So do say hello, let me know where you're watching from, and tell me about your experience of behaviour policies, because that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about something that affects huge numbers of SEND families, but is often quite misunderstood. And there's lots and lots of reasons why it's misunderstood as well. And I'm going to be exploring some of those. Not always good reasons, sadly, but we'll get to that shortly in a moment. Um, so do say hello, as I've said, on YouTube. I know it's a bit different saying hi on YouTube and Facebook, but do say a quick hey, and my elves will tell me. Morning, Chrissa. Oh, Chrissa, you're watching. This is not downtime. Ugh, but I am ever so pleased to have your support. And morning light films as well. Light films always love watching our live streams. So good morning, good morning. So school behaviour policies and children with SEND. This morning we are going to explore a number of, I would say, key questions I get asked in my role. So if you don't know me, as I said, I'm head of advocacy and consultancy, and that means my job has sort of two main prongs. I help families directly. So families come to me and they go, oh, we've got a SEND issue. In many cases, oh, we've got this issue with the behaviour policy at school. Help us, help me sort this out, help me communicate what we need to the school. But I also train schools. So I go into schools and I look at their behaviour policies and help them ensure that they are truly inclusive, that they're not discriminatory, that they're not ableist, but they also ensure the good order of the school. They ensure that everyone is safe and everyone understands the expectations. Because yeah, we just we just because a young person has SEND doesn't mean we need to lessen our expectations. And in fact, that in itself is quite ableist. We can still enjoy a respectful and safe environment. So it's about how we marry up the two. And today, this morning, we're going to explore what schools can and cannot lawfully do within their behaviour policies. We'll be talking a little bit about the Equality Act as well. And if the Equality Act stuff rings true for you in any way, we actually have a webinar on the Sunshine Academy that I did earlier this year, all about disability discrimination and what to do if you feel that that applies to you. So if you watch this and you think, oh, I'm a bit worried that something discriminatory is going on, watch that webinar because it will give you loads and loads of help. We'll be talking about reasonable adjustments and what reasonable adjustments to a behaviour policy might look like. Unfortunately, many schools have quite a rigid approach to the behaviour policy, and I'll try to explain the reasoning and the rationale behind that, but also give you some good tips and tricks as to how you should sort of engage with discussion, so that you have a good chance of a favourable outcome there. We'll be talking about common mistakes that are made, both by schools and by parents, so that hopefully you can keep an eye out for those and mitigate those. We'll be talking about wording because that really matters in a policy, believe it or not. And we will be talking about what really good, genuine, inclusive practice looks like in a school when it comes to behaviour. So obviously, I know that I'll have quite a number of different people watching. I'll have parents of children with additional needs or neurodivergent children. We may have some neurodivergent adults watching. This session is particularly relevant to you. But also, I really hope that we have some professionals watching. If you are a professional watching, do let me know. Do say hi in the YouTube comments, because I love it when professionals join us, teachers, Senkos. Hopefully you'll find this really useful too. And as always, this is a sort of general advice session rather than specific advice for individual cases. If you do want a bit more specific advice, your best bet is hopping on the Sunshine Academy and using our fabulous community area where you can talk a little bit more about your case in detail, and one of our fabulous consultants can answer you generally within a day, so you get quite quick answers. And feel free to ask any questions as we go. You don't need to wait until the end. We're storing all the questions up, and then I can come to them sort of as and when we go, or at the end. So first of all, let's talk about why behaviour policies matter. And to address this question, I sort of want to ask another question, and that is, what is a behaviour policy actually for? Like, why do we have them? And when you ask schools this question, and when you ask parents this question, you do get quite different answers. So to explore both sides, because here at Sunshine Support, we love looking at both sides. We love being, as we say all the time, curious, not judgmental, trying to work out how each side might see an issue so that each side can really empathise with and understand the other perspective. So if I'd ask a school, what is a behaviour policy for? Generally, most schools would say it exists to keep children safe, to create and ensure consistent expectations for all. A behavioural policy will also be said generally to promote good learning environments and to encourage learning and progress to happen. And there will be an element that a school will say to manage disruption. So when I say disruption, that can be any type of disruption to the good order of the school. Now, the good order is a phrase that I'll be returning to a few times in this live, because it's one of those phrases that pop up a lot in sort of policy. And there's some rules as to sort of how ensuring good order can be done. And there are some exemptions to things which are really poignant and important for SEND families to understand around the good order at the school. Now, the problem is behaviour policies are often written with a neurotypical child in mind. And in any mainstream school, generally speaking, most of the school population, a higher proportion, will be neurotypical. However, we know that there's also going to be a significant proportion of children who are not. Either they have EHC plans, or they have diagnoses, or they have SEND support at school level, or even a known unmet need. And they can be the most challenging situations to capture with behaviour policy, because it's not black and white. So a school can't say, that person has ADHD, therefore, if we are to discipline them through this behaviour policy in that way, it might be discriminatory, therefore we can't do that. Quite binary. What about those young people who aren't in that category, who might be struggling to attend school, who might be in, fight, flight, freeze, sort of nervous system state of mind whilst in school, and then that translates to behaviours that might be seen as challenging or disruptive to the good order? What about those young people? And we'll be talking about those in a bit more detail. So many policies, because of the nature of a policy, it's meant to be one size fits all. It's meant to capture the majority. And most behaviour policies do assume that all children sort of work in the same way. So they might process instructions in the same way, communicate in the same way, regulate their emotions in the same way, meet expectations in the same way. And we know that that is not true. And it's not true really for all children, I guess. It's like not just children with SEND. We're all different human beings at the end of the day. But we have to think really, really carefully about our children with SEND because they will frequently experience communication differences, sensory overwhelm, processing delays, anxiety, challenges with executive function, emotional regulation challenges, and all of these things impact on a young person's capacity to adhere to a fixed set of expectations. So if, for example, we take sensory overwhelm, just for a straightforward example, if you are living in a space at school or at work or in life where you are consistently overwhelmed by sensory stimuli, your capacity to regulate yourself and to behave in an expected way in that environment massively reduces. I always use the example of an invisible drill. If you were an adult going to work and you sat at your desk and somebody had a pneumatic drill next to you, loudly drilling the floor, you would go to your manager and say, I can't work like this. I'm going to call ACAS. And they go, oh, I'm very, very sorry, Mrs. Jarvis. You're right. You've got a massive pneumatic drill next to you. Let's move you. Let's move you away. Let's not expect you to be able to be reasonable in this situation if we make you stay by the drill. Let's understand that that's awful and let's move you away. And children with sensory overwhelm will be going through that same thing. There'll be something that is acting like that, that's making them feel overwhelmed, that's making them feel very, very stressed and anxious. They might not be able to communicate what that is other than through, my cup is completely full to the brim and I just need to just get it out there. If we then apply the behaviour policy in a very fixed way, it could then become very discriminatory. And no one intends them to be discriminatory. Schools don't, well, I say this in good faith because I was a teacher. I was a head teacher of a specialist setting, and before that, I was a mainstream head teacher. But like, no one sets out to make children's lives miserable. I really wholeheartedly believe this in my heart. I do. I mean, I have had some moments where that's called into question as a belief, but generally speaking, when a school does a behaviour policy, they don't want to be taken to court for disability discrimination. They want it to be a workable policy that doesn't discriminate. Yet, we can't avoid the truth, which is when families come to Sunshine Support, they need a variety of different sort of help. But one of the things that I get often told by parents are things like, he's constantly in detention. She's always on behaviour charts or on report. Every week we're called because of incidents. They keep saying he chooses to behave this way. He said he wanted this staff member. We gave him that staff member. He still was destructive. It's a choice. These situations are often actually not behaviour problems. They're unmet need. And that is a really important distinction. And one of the most important bits of training that I do with schools is not about what to do, not about your policy. No, that's down the track. We have to start right at the beginning about reframing what is challenging behaviour or behaviours that challenge. What does it come from? And we need to be looking at behaviour, a bit like attendance, as a byproduct of having needs met, of feeling safe, of having a regulated nervous system. If we can tackle those things, then behaviour as a concept should naturally sort of follow. So let's pause for a moment. Let me know in the comments if you can. Has your child ever been sanctioned for behaviour linked to their SEND? Let me know. I'm going to just delve into the comments. Morning, Marnie. Nice to see you. Good to see you spending your holidays upskilling yourself. Morning, Jagoda. Ah, one of my families. Hi, Jagoda. Hope you're well. Jagoda, I helped through a tribunal and we got the school of choice, and it's just been so transformative, and I love getting updates about how things are going. So thank you so much for coming along. It means a lot. So let me know in the comments. Let me know if your child has ever been sanctioned for behaviour that was actually linked to their SEND. I'll tell you a little story just whilst we're waiting for comments to come in, of this exact thing that happened to one of my families. And we're still in disability discrimination sort of tribunal for this. Because the lovely tribunal, as behind as they are, they pulled our hearing the like 2 days before it was due to take place and haven't relisted it. So we're on at them at the moment to relist the hearing. But what happened was this young man was in a special school, a local authority maintained special school, and he has a PDA profile of autism, so highly demand avoidant that comes from a place of deep anxiety. So you can see where this is going. And when he is in that nervous system dysregulation, that fight flight mode, he didn't really freeze, it was either fight or flight. His capacity to reason or be reasoned with was non-existent. It was a feature of his disability. And during his time at this local authority special school, he was excluded, fixed term excluded on multiple occasions, which were not lawful. And we're now in court about that, amongst other poor failings of how he was treated. Thankfully, he's now in a beautiful other special school and is absolutely thriving. So that tells you all you need to know there, doesn't it? We've got a message from Mike. Hi, Mike. Thank you for watching. Yes, we couldn't go to lessons because mental health was so bad. The teacher then said my child didn't need to go to lessons, but then yet recorded it on her behaviour record as truancy. Gosh, Mike, that is ridiculous mixed messages going on there. If I were that child, I would be furious. Like, what is expected of me? No clarity whatsoever. And ironically, many schools will say, well, that's why we have a behaviour policy to provide clarity. But we all know policies are only as good as who's implementing them on a day-to-day basis. And that's half the time a big problem. So let's talk about what schools actually can and can't do. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that schools can simply do whatever their behaviour policy says. Well, that's not true, because a policy doesn't override the law. Let that sink in for a moment. It doesn't override what the law says. Now, we come across so many policies at Sunshine Support which contravene the law. They just do. Transport is particularly one that contravenes the law a lot of the time. Local authority transport policies, never just accept those as lawful, interrogate those. Behaviour policies also, unfortunately, don't always align with the law. And you only have to Google, school behaviour policy, special needs, to find a million articles of schools who are taking quite a draconian approach to behaviour, very one size fits all, and they have been found to be discriminatory policies. So schools can set expectations. Absolutely. So they should. Expectations tell us all where we need to be. My favourite behaviour policy I've ever read also has teacher expectations in it about how teachers, one human being to another, to pupils, also that pupils have something to expect from them, as in, be treated fairly with respect. It was a really nice two-way thing. A behaviour policy and schools can issue sanctions. They can do that. They can use behaviour management systems. They can exclude pupils in certain circumstances, and they can manage risks to safety as well. But what schools can't do is ignore disability. That's the headline. They can't do that. Ignore medical needs is another. Argue about what medical needs are. Prepare yourself for that. But if that's you and you're in the throes of arguing as to what constitutes a medical need, there is government documentation out there about the roles and responsibilities for children who can't attend school. In there, it tells you a lot about what you shouldn't be asked to provide. So look up that if you need that. Some of my elves might even be linking to some of these in the comments, which will be really helpful to you. Schools can't apply policies rigidly without considering individual circumstances. So they have to consider your child as an individual before they apply things just willy-nilly blanket. Um, they can't punish manifestations of disability without considering the Equality Act duties. So things like reasonable adjustments. Also, like the definition of what disability is. Guess what? It's not a diagnosis. Um, Please watch my webinar on disability discrimination, because you don't have to have a diagnosis to be disabled. It's about the impact of your disability, how long it has featured in your life, and what it causes you to be disadvantaged, and how. Um, and schools can't refuse reasonable adjustments either. And that's a really crucial distinction, because some parents will hear and be told, oh, well, that's our policy. That's what we're doing it for. That's why, as though that sort of ends the discussion. But actually, the next question should always be, how does your policy account for disability related needs? Because that's where the legal duty sits. Good schools really do understand that, and I do encounter them. I must reassure you about that. But poor schools will hide behind that policy wording. So I'm just going to jump to my other screen and read out some of the comments that we've got. Lots of comments, loving that. Thank you. I love a good lively discussion about sanctions. So ours is more of an umbrella sanction, says Sophie. In terms of my child never qualifies for treats based on their poor attendance. Oh, that one is just, I hate this. I hate these end of term attendance based things. It's easy for a school to attach a treat to attendance because attendance is numerical, and therefore it's easy to do. It's also lazy to do. I'm sorry if I'm upsetting teachers, but this is one hill I'm going to die on. It's such a lazy thing to just give things out for attendance, because it is actively ableist. Um, I have a family who attend a routine CAMHS appointment, and even though the absence is authorised, it still is absence, and therefore 100% attendance isn't possible. Therefore, he couldn't go to the pizza party. And if he didn't go to CAMHS to have his therapy stuff, then where on earth would he be? And you say to the school, like, can you not see that this is crazy? And they're like, well, if we deviate from one child, we'll have to deviate for them all. Yeah, that's the whole point. You have to look at each individual child, for goodness sake. Ah, sorry, a bit of a soapbox moment there. Susanna, oh, hello, another friend of Sunshine. My children that are in mainstream secondary have been disciplined for things that are to do with SEND, and even disciplined for using the doodle books that the school actually put in place for them. Oh, a massive emoji, head hand emoji. That's mad. Yes, you can use a doodle book, and then because you know what it often happens with like teachers who don't know children very well, or supply teachers, they just come along and go, put that fiddle toy away. You don't need that. Put that doodle book away. Stop doing that. Stop chewing. And they haven't got a clue, because there's not. Again, we're talking policy and procedure. We need something in place in every school that ensures that those coming into the school on like supply work and things have very quick access to a summarized database of, I type in this child's name and it tells me what adjustments they have before I start ragging on the child. Not hard. Um, Oh, Mike's back with another comment. Also recorded her as needing a corrective conversation. Oh, I hate these things, corrective conversations, for saying how hot it was with a swear word. This was sensory overload. She was dysregulating. It was the hottest day of the year. So you need a corrective conversation. I just hate that as a phrase, for swearing about the heat. You can have that conversation. You just need to be mindful of when. And you don't sanction it as a thing. You just talk human being to human being. You just go, gosh, it is really hot. I can see that you're quite overloaded sensory wise. What can we do to make you feel more comfortable? And then when the young person is more comfortable, you then have just a natural conversation of, it's a bit unexpected to swear at school, but I totally get it in the moment. Are you feeling better? Yes. So you're not going to swear now, are you? Mad. Michelle, hello, Michelle. Stepson was suspended, severe dyslexia, and was told to hurry up, which then impacted PDA traits. He sat looking out the window and then lost it and communicated the only way to get out of the lesson, as in to leave. Yeah, don't blame him. don't know what your name is, but JEB Gamer, Jeb Gamer, has said, my child has been sanctioned for things that he is exempt from in his EHCP and other needs related behaviour. That is awful. Like, that is literally disability discrimination. It's like textbook case of EHCP says this, you've done the opposite, you've sanctioned. Terrible. Helen, my daughter was badly bullied, made to sign the same behaviour contract as the bullies. Is this lawful? Well, it's certainly not okay. She has huge emotional needs, very vulnerable and unable to ask for help, no pastoral care. Sounds very victim blamey to me. Like, I'm just stunned that there would be a world in which identified bullies and identified victim has to share the same behaviour contract. That is madness. I'm really sorry that you've gone through that. I would be looking at a complaint for that if it were me, broadly speaking. Of course, I'd need to know a bit more. If you're a member of the academy, hop on the community area and tell us a bit more about that. And one of our elves will come and help you. We've got our pre-litigation manager, Jess. She's really good at DD cases, and she'll be able to like help you out a little bit on message there. So talking of disability discrimination and the Equality Act, let's talk about that because it is the most important piece of legislation in this area, the Equality Act. So a disabled pupil is protected from discrimination. This is a binary fact, and many children with SEND meet the Equality Act definition of disability. So, practical example. Imagine a child with autism, an autistic child. Everyone likes the terminology differently. We don't prefer one or the other, whichever is right for you, whichever is your identity. A child who is autistic becomes overwhelmed, refuses to transition from place to place, a bit like Michelle's situation we just heard about, shouts, runs from class. There we go, exactly like Michelle's situation. The school applies the same sanction to that child as they would apply to any child. At first glance, it might seem equalising or fair, but equality isn't about treating everyone the same. That's a really important distinction. Sometimes treating everybody identically actually creates unfairness. It's not equality. So the real question is, was the behaviour linked to that child's disability? So if yes, the school has to think carefully before they impose any sanctions. It can't just be done as a blanket thing. I'm not saying send means no consequences. I must underscore that because that's absolutely not the case. But what it does mean is that schools have to understand why the behaviour occurred, what need was driving that behaviour, what adjustments were possible, and whether support was adequate. And the Equality Act requires schools to think deeply, much more deeply than simply, oh, there's a rule broken, the punishment has to be applied, because that is the danger zone for a sort of falling foul, I guess, of the Equality Act. We have another Helen saying, hi. My daughter is PDA. She gets the OTIS currently. Oh, okay, cool. Hope that's working out for you. The OTIS is another one of my areas of real sort of interest. I do a lot of the OTIS tribunals and a lot of the OTIS support, sort of fallen into that really. And Helen, you're saying that you were threatened with permanent exclusion. So you pulled her out at age 7 and she's now 10. And she used to do things like ran from classes. I had a very interesting conversation with a journalist yesterday who's doing quite a big piece of exposure on exclusions and prosecutions for non-attendance. And we had this really interesting chat about how some local authorities are pushing families into home education so that they can keep their prosecution numbers down. And then you get other local authorities who are very anti-home education, say make it very hard for people to successfully and comfortably home educate, and their prosecutions for non-attendance and exclusion rates are significantly higher and disproportionate. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So think about your experiences at school. Has your school ever said to you anything like, we treat all children exactly the same, almost like a badge of honour? Mrs. Jarvis, here we treat all children exactly the same. You don't have to worry about discrimination. All children get treated equally. But do they? If they truly treat all children identically, is that actually equality? No. Anyway, let's move on to reasonable adjustments, because this is something we get asked about a lot. Like, what is a reasonable adjustment? What can I ask for? There's no black and white answer to what can I ask for, because you're dealing with lots of schools with different attitudes. And I always say that the answer to what can I ask for is ask for anything that you think is reasonable. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. And this is where many schools, I feel, either really shine or they really struggle. And reasonable adjustments, basically, brought in a blanket broad sense, they are changes to, well, anything really, that remove barriers or help remove barriers arising from disability. So something important is reasonable adjustments are not rewards. Let me know in the comments if that rings true for you. I've had a family recently where like the movement break time specified on the EHCP was treated like a reward. So if you do worksheet X, you then like win your movement break. If you don't do the worksheet, you don't win your movement break. Sorry, what? The movement break is required in order to regulate and be able to access the learning. Like it's not a reward. Similarly for fidget toys. Oh, if you do this, then you get your fidget toy. No, you need the fidget toy in order to access the learning. Crazy. These are not special treatment things. These are like legal protections that enable your child to, excuse me, you can tell when I get really angry, so my throat seizes up. I'm going to say. So examples of this kind of like adjustments to things come under several different categories. So we have things like adjustments to instructions. So things like allowing processing time, giving visual supports, simplifying your language. If you've got a young person who is in significant distress and you're going, right, you've got to move out of this corridor now, otherwise you'll be sanctioned, that is going to only end one way, and that's with a sanction and a child in significantly more distress and potentially trauma. So what you need to be seeing or asking for, and the best schools have this written into their behaviour policy, are adjustments to the way that children are communicated with if they are in that nervous system breakdown. We can also ask for adjustments to the environment. Now, we can't always change a school. Many schools are still in the same building that they were built in donkeys years ago, and they are therefore stuck in a space of time that no longer exists anymore. We don't, if you go into the world of work, you have things like adjustable size desks, breakout spaces, different seating, flexible working times, that kind of thing. That's the world of work we're entering now. Schools haven't caught up, and the physical space is often quite still very old-fashioned. So if you can't adjust the environment, then what can you adjust reasonably for that young person? So things like breaks from that overloading sensory environment, sensory breaks, quiet spaces, reduced noise exposure, that kind of thing. We also need to adjust our expectations. So modified transitions, alternative recording methods, so not making somebody write everything. Type is equally as valuable. Flexible movement arrangements. These are things that adjust expectations to remove the barrier of disability. What they don't do is lower expectation. You see, we wouldn't ever deny a child the use of a wheelchair if they couldn't move around. We wouldn't ever make a child earn a wheelchair by doing a worksheet. It doesn't make any logical sense. And this is the same thing that has to be applied, the same way of thinking that has to be applied. And we do need reasonable adjustments to behaviour systems. So alternative sanction approaches and individual risk assessments, modified reward systems. Your child might absolutely thrive on rewards, but not the rewards that are sort of the way that the school do it. They may hate rewards. I've got a lot of PDAs I work with who see them as bribes, and actually their reward is feeling respected, learning something that they're interested in, and feeling safe. They don't need sticker charts or things that makes things worse. So, um, as well, the behaviour policy needs to show where every possible other sanction has been explored first, every possible restorative approach, support for the unmet need before blindly applying sanction. The Autism Education Trust, the AET, has a really, really great document about how to handle reintegration meetings after exclusions. And so many schools don't even know it exists. And it's a brilliant, it's a really accessible document that literally just says, right, this is how a reintegration meeting following exclusion needs to go for an autistic person. And there are some such simple things that make that process better. And so many schools don't even know it's there. So it's mad. So what really worries me is when schools treat reasonable adjustments as optional, because they're not. The duty exists whether a school likes the adjustment or not. You might not like a fiddle toy, but if it's there, it's got to be done. The discussion should always be from a place of how can we collaboratively make this work, not we don't do that here, which is a big difference. I'm going to delve, so I've got a really sore throat today, delve into the comments and give you a few. The school created an individual support plan and learning plan that did not take into account my child's SEND or SEMH. Instead, both plans are a copy and paste of the behaviour policy. Yeah, I don't have anything to say to that. It's just ludicrous. Chrissa, I ended up in DD tribunal for my daughter's suspension, where the school admitted to treating her unfavourably, admitted to suspending her due to a disability. It was so distressing for her. Thankfully, she's in a school now that sees her. They treat every interaction in a really human-centred way. Shame other schools can't do the same. Here, here. Schools need to understand that heading to DD tribunal is awful, truly awful, not just for the family, but the staff as well. Just do the right thing to start with. Yes. And Chris has gone on to say, when we were in DD tribunal, it was distressing to see the school leader throw her staff under the bus. And one in particular looked like she was about to really break down. It was heartbreaking. Gosh, Chris, I must say that that's very pragmatic of you to see that, because that I know how traumatizing that was for you and your family. Yet you are worried about the teacher being thrown under the bus. That sort of summarizes Sunshine Support in one sentence, I think. We are here for humans, good humans who need help. And that is a perfect example of that. So, parents watching, first of all, I know hopefully we have some professionals. Do tell me in the comments if you are a professional, by the way. Do say hi. So, common problems parents should watch out for. These are some of the biggest red flags that I see / hear. And I'm just going to whiz through them because I wrote them all down. I sort of did a bit of prep for this and thought, what are the things I consistently hear from my families? Number one, we don't make exceptions. This is often completely inconsistent with reasonable adjustment, lawful duties. Red flag number two, this behaviour is a choice. Okay, sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. And we have to investigate rather than assume, because it's equally as damaging to assume that every behaviour is not a choice, because then that's when our expectations start to slip. It's the investigation, it's the curiosity, it's the time, it's the respect that needs to happen to determine which it is. That's the important bit. Red flag number three, we've always done it this way. I've lost count of how many times this is a thing. It's a really dangerous phrase because good practice constantly evolves all the time. I look back on my early years as a teacher in around about 2008. So my career was a bit crazy. I became a teacher in 2005, and at the end of my newly qualified teaching year, I became a head of year. don't know how, but I did, and I had a team of tutors. And when I was the head of year, the school's policy was these big attendance reward things, and I absolutely gleefully and wholeheartedly embraced the I'm going to get my year group the best attendance I can get, and I'm going to get them as many of them on this trip as I can. And yeah, look back on that now and think, yuck, ick. Um, and I've now obviously been a teacher now for knocking on the door of 20 years, because I still call myself a teacher, by the way, even though I do what I do now. I am a teacher. I'll always be a teacher. Um, just 20 years of experience. I'm constantly learning things that are new. Every time I host a webinar, I'm learning new things. I'm learning ways that I can make my practice better for young people. And if schools don't do that, then yeah, they're just going to be stuck. Red flag 4, lots of repeated sanctions with no change. If punishment isn't working, the question should be, what need are we missing? What need is being unfulfilled? Because no one wants to be punished the whole time. No one wants to live a life of constantly waiting to be told off. And this is where some of our young people, particularly those with PDA traits or presentation of autism, they will just press the button and go, well, you all hate me. And it makes me less anxious to know that you're going to hate me. So I'm just going to give you reason to hate me, because if I actually put myself out there and try and adhere to your social expectations, you may hate me anyway. And that's out of my control. And imagine living in that state of permanent nervous system unrest. It's so heartbreaking. So, schools, if punishments aren't working, it's because something else is wrong. Red flag 5, behaviour plans with no SEND considerations. Every behaviour intervention should connect back to understanding the driver behind that behaviour, the need behind that behaviour. Because even those children who, after you investigate everything, it comes down to that behaviour is a choice after all, why are they making that choice? Why? Because they're still making a choice that results in negative consequences for them. Why are they doing that? And then you delve a little bit further, because you find then there's often years and years and years of intergenerational school trauma that's feeding into the thing. And the whole family might need help, not just the child whose behaviour is the headline, you know? And it's our duty as educators to find out what's going on. If we just say it's all someone else's problem, then we're never, ever going to progress. Never. Oh, so wording. Let's talk about policies themselves before we come to some final questions at the end of this chat. So wording of a behaviour policy can tell you a lot about the school. So really positive policies include language like individual needs, reasonable adjustments, disability considerations, proportionate responses, inclusive practice. Behaviours that are less inclusive, behaviour policies that are less inclusive, things like zero tolerance, automatic sanctions, no exceptions, ones with uniform consequences that are, again, blindly applied. Those phrases aren't necessarily automatically unlawful, but they can become really problematic if applied really inflexibly. And the best policies combine consistency with professional judgment. And that is actually what inclusion really should look like. So, having spent quite a few years leading specialist provision, I have seen schools get this right. So, good practice looks like understanding before the application of consequences. So, staff will ask, what happened? Like we in our school, we used to have different debrief styles for pupils depending on their speech and language profile. So, we were lucky enough to have some on-site speech and language therapy therapists and therapy assistants as well who would help us with this. But if you've got therapy time in your school, picking a therapist's brain about the style of debrief that particular young people might need to get the most out of them is really, really key. So being able to unpick and understand what happened, I value your take on where this went wrong. That happens first before asking, okay, what sanctions should follow, if any. We want to prevent before we react. So good schools identify the triggers, they don't wait for the crisis. So trying to understand the human behind the presentation of behaviour as a proactive measure is really, really key. Good schools really aim for individualisation. So one strategy will not work for every child. And in order to get to the right one, you need to make sure you investigate, that you are curious and not judgmental, but also involve parents. Create a truly two-way pathway of respect between parents and the school. Parents need to be listened to. They need to not be blamed. The Sense Code of Practice says it really clearly that parents are the experts of their own child. Afford them that expertise. We do like data as well as a school. Schools evaluate data all the time. They evaluate patterns, they evaluate triggers, they evaluate environmental factors, they evaluate staff responses. What they need to then do with that is actually act upon it and use it. So rather than just go, oh, in a very, again, binary way, oh, here are the numbers of exclusions, we've got to bring these down, so we're going to get harder. We need to be going deeper into the data. We need to be really identifying triggers. We had little behaviour work throughs that we used to do in our school, sort of ABC, antecedent behaviour, consequence, and then we try to work out like almost like a visual map of, at each point in this situation, where could we have managed it in a way that was more proactive, that reduced the overwhelm? What do we have to answer to, you know? And keeping inclusion at the centre. So the question isn't how do we make this child fit our system? The question is how we adapt our system so that this child can succeed, knowing that success looks different for everyone as well. That is the difference between compliance and inclusion, because the two things are different. We used to use particular terminology. We didn't ever use words like inappropriate behaviour, because to that young person in crisis, their behaviour was entirely appropriate to themselves, to communicate the distress they were feeling, that they didn't have words to communicate. To tell them then that that behaviour is inappropriate belittles and sort of undermines how they were feeling. We used to use unexpected, because actually that then puts the onus on everyone else around them. I didn't understand your language at that moment. Like, I don't have the skill set in that moment to understand the language you were speaking to know what the matter was. It was unexpected behaviour for the situation. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't judgmental, sort of, I'm not judging you for it. It was just, I found that unexpected. So I didn't know necessarily the best way to respond. So next time, how can we, work out how to communicate your needs in a way that I can understand? I will also make the effort to get on the Duolingo and learn the way to speak your language so that I can help you when you're in distress. And then, you know, we can really work together on it. It's a two-way respect thing. And it's not inappropriate or bad. It's just unexpected. So that's one of the things we used to do. So before I come to messages again, I'll just finish by summarising sort of basically the key bits I've talked about today, particularly if you've only joined halfway through. Hello if you have, say hi. School policies don't override equality law. That is a binary truth. Children with SEND may require different approaches to behaviour management, and reasonable adjustments in this regard are a legal duty. They're not a favour, they're not a reward. Repeated behaviour incidents, they often indicate unmet need, and we need to find out what that need might be and work out how to meet it. Policy wording really matters. Look for those red flags of wording, look for those green flags of wording, particularly if you're choosing a school. A lot of these policies are available on the school's website, so you can download them and you can read them and see, does this align with this ethos of mutual respect and high expectations for all children, no matter how they look, how the expectations look, that is. The best schools focus on understanding and support, not simply punishment. And most importantly, fairness is not treating every child the same. Fairness is recognising what each child needs to access education successfully. And that's the bottom line. So thank you for joining me. And I'm going to delve into the comments and see what we've got written. So, um, Mike marked as truant and given a detention when attending drama therapy. Wow. Are you still at this school, Mike? Like, are you hanging on by some fingernails to this school, or have you got out of it? Like, I really hope that you're not there anymore. If you are, I think you might need to hop on our academy, watch the disability discrimination webinar, and also the one about making complaints. I also got one on there about complaints. Just saying. Um, Helen, my school constantly telling my daughter to make the right choices. It made me so upset. Do you know, that is something that really winds me up. Sorry, up I go on my soapbox again. Because if you're in that moment of nervous system distress and you get told to make the right choice, you're not making the right choice. The expectation is you to make a conforming choice, make a choice that makes other people who aren't disabled feel more comfortable. And that's not okay. That's even before you get to the bit where you probably don't have capacity to make a choice in the first place. And it, it it's part of the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of sticker charts, apart from for children who genuinely love sticker charts, in which case you do you. But generally, as a blanket thing, I'm not a big fan because if you have a child who has a need and they then can't do a thing, so I can't do this maths worksheet because I'm feeling sensorily overwhelmed. Somebody coming along and going, if you do this maths sheet, you get a sticker on your chart, and then if you fill it up by the end of the chart, you get something you really want. That makes the whole situation about 1,000 times worse. Because not only do you have a child who's struggling with the sensory thing, you now have a child who really wants the thing that feels like it's at the top of an insurmountable mountain. So what happens then? You get shame, you get anger that you're never going to get there. And then what do you get? Behaviours that challenge. So yeah, I'm not saying sticker charts are wrong. Some kids love them. My two really love a sticker chart. Breaks my heart a bit, but they just do. So we have sticker charts. But don't give everyone a sticker chart, you know? Rrr. Oh, Mike, you're appealing your permanent exclusion. Good on you. Hop on the academy if you're not on there. There's lots on there for you to do. There's a exclusions webinar as well on there, which might be helpful. And our pre-litigation manager, Jess, she's really hot on exclusions. So it might be good to pick her brain on the community area. The school formally conceded liability for disability discrimination against my child before the final hearing. They permanently excluded him 4 days later. What? Okay, thank goodness. I like my jaw hit the floor then. I was like, are you actually, it's real? And then you followed it up with another message that says, the subsequent independent review panel found the decision to be irrational and not a last resort and told the school they had to look at it again. The school didn't, so we're off to tribunal again. That is bonkers. I'd be like, that doesn't make any logical or rational sense whatsoever. That's crazy. Best of luck with your tribunal. I hope you've got some representation to help you because that feels like a minefield. Mike, you're also in the space of permanent exclusion. Meeting of governors adjourned till October due to already identifying a breach in Department for Education guidance. Oh, good. Chrissa, a lot of adults hold children to a much higher standard of behaviour than they do themselves or their peers. Yes. Do you know what? One of the phrases I really hate, do as I say and not as I do. No. Like, I hate that phrase. It's so old-fashioned. It's so archaic. Um, the thing that I really want to underscore for all teachers who might be watching, you can have high expectations of your learners, that they treat you with respect. You can have those expectations. You just got to treat them with respect too. That doesn't lessen the respect they have for you as a teacher or a leader. That doesn't make undermine your status or your hierarchy. It's just a human and a human being a team in learning. That's it. And yeah, half the problems in schools would not exist if we all had that attitude. Chrissa, I remember being in my daughter's EHCP annual review, and a professional suggested we state must be emotionally regulated at all times to the targets. I remember this. I asked if she was able to do that too. Are you able to remain entirely regulated at all times? Yes, well, no, no one is. I'm not. Like, do you know what happened about 3 minutes ago? I'll let you into the backstage of Alive. About 3 minutes ago, a really confused looking Deliveroo driver just came up my drive with a big Tesco bag, and I'm thinking, well, I haven't ordered that. And I don't want to talk to you because I'm on a Facebook Live. And I was like, please go away. And then he did, thankfully. He worked out he was in the wrong place. But in that moment, I was not regulated. My heart was going, and if someone had come along to me at that point and tried to get me to do something else, whilst I'm trying to manage a Facebook Live, whilst I'm trying to think, please, delivery driver, do not come and interrupt this. Do you know, I wouldn't be able to be nervous system regulated. Yet we ask a child to do that. That is crazy. Carissa, I've obviously been there in your journey along your child's schooling and their experience of their school in the last few years that they were there, which took a turn, didn't it? It doesn't surprise me that happened, but it does sadden me. And in fact, all of the stories we've heard in the comments today are heartbreaking. They are really sad, but they also make me really mad because it doesn't need to be like that. It does not need to be like that. Schools can have really good order. They can have high expectations. They can have cultures of respect. I'm exceptionally fortunate with the primary school my children are in. They do things like completely maverick way of doing things, but the respect every pupil in that school has for each other and staff is amazing. And their behaviour policy is probably one of the shortest I've ever seen. And it is just all about mutual respect, what children can expect from staff, and how every child, before even any sanction is applied, they are talked to and seen as an individual, and we try and understand what's going on. There's no exclusions. It just don't happen. It's amazing. And you walk around, and there's just good order. And it's possible. It really is possible to do. It takes a long time to get there, and it often takes a leader who is strong. And the problem is, in a lot of these schools where it's not right, the leader thinks they're strong because they are loud or going on the headlines of the Daily Mail saying all our children have the same haircut, walk the same way on the stairs. That's not strength. I'm a bit of a Game of Thrones fan, and one of my favourite quotes is, any king that says, I am the king, is no king. You don't need to be loud in that way to have authority. Some of the most effective school leaders are the ones who are curious, who accept that they don't know everything and that they probably never will in education, because people always evolve. And when you've dealt, like, people themselves are so unpredictable. And they're the best leaders. They're the quiet ones who lead with curiosity, who lead by example, who give respect as much as expect it back. And that's where it's really creative. Anyway, I could talk about this for ages and ages because it's my big passion. But I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining me today. It's a real privilege, I find, when people choose to spend some of their day to come and hang out with me on Facebook Live. I find that amazing. So thank you very much. And I would encourage anybody who's not on the Academy to jump on the Academy. I have a cheeky code. It's Kelly30. If you hop on the Academy, you get 30% off for 3 months, which is just in time for School Avoidance Awareness Week, which is coming up in September. And all of our content around school avoidance is all included in the Academy price. So if you're not on the Academy yet, now is the time to do it. Use Kelly30. And you can be part of our School Avoidance Awareness Week, where we've got loads of speakers, loads of content, all about the drivers behind school attendance difficulties. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait for it. So yeah, jump on. And we've got our Ask the Expert advice clinic on the Academy as well, where you can come and talk to one of our consultants about your case. It's just so good. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to click stop, which might abruptly kick you all off. But if you have enjoyed this live, do share it, because you can watch it again on my YouTube channel, and do share it with others that you think might be interested. And if you do need more individual support, do get in touch. Our academy is a great place to do that. So thank you again for your time, and I wish you all the very best for a lovely rest of day. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Recording.